Hey there, my name is Gabriel for those who don't know me, and I make videos on philosophy regarding unity. More specifically, philosophy on the law of one and Advaita, or non-duality. Those are my two main philosophies. So this is going to be an introductory explanation of this series that is going to be geared towards what we call the law of one. And so that's why I picked the topic for today, to explain the concept of the law of one. Now, whether you are a veteran, a student of the law of one, or are new to this type of philosophy, stay put, because this is going to either validate what you already know, maybe add a little bit more of color to it, or it's going to give you a pretty good basis to start understanding this. And this leads me to the next point, which is that I'll probably repeat this in every video, but these concepts are rather complex, but that's because they're fascinating and you can get into them, as with any other philosophy, to a very large extent. That means that these videos are going to be, at best, an introduction to it, just a basic explanation of it. Pretty much to either whet your appetite so you're craving for more, or to discourage you because, hey, this is not for you. That's completely plausible. So that is a very important point for me to stress. The next thing is that because of the complexity and fascination that we can get into these topics, there's a lot of videos that I have made and continue to make that are related to these concepts. So you will find them here if they're relevant. If not, then they won't appear here throughout the series. Now, the other important point is that I have been covering what is called the raw material, which I'll explain in a little bit, at pretty much a large extent in the past 2 years, and it will continue to be going for the next 2 years at least. So you're going to find a lot of that material either suggested here, or I will direct you to any specific session which explains these concepts. So with all of this out of the way, I can now get into the main topic of this video, which is the concept of the law of one. Now, I said that these videos are going to be on the short side because they're sort of explanatory of the concepts, just to give a basic idea, again, to either encourage you or discourage you to continue with this with this study. And of course, the idea of discouraging you is not by my explanation, but rather because this may not resonate with you. And that's a very important thing to keep in mind. So why do I need to extend myself in the law of one? First of all, because the law of one is not really something that we can define. If you have previous knowledge of non-duality and the inability of us to explain or talk about consciousness, then you can relate to this. If not, and you have a basic idea of mathematics, you know that infinity cannot be expressed. So we're talking about the same idea here, and that's why it's called the law of one, which in non-duality, it is said non-duality because it doesn't have two, as opposed to oneness, because oneness implies many. And so you get the kind of point that I'm trying to get at with the inability that we have to explain certain things that are beyond our comprehension of the human mind, or the mind in general, because it's just not possible to describe infinity in this case. So that's why I need to extend myself, and as a virtue of trying to talk about the impossible, which is really the language of poetry, that's basically what I'll be doing here with what I have written down on the board, mainly for me so I can remember what I want to say, and second for you so you can also check the points and have a visual of it. So I know some of you like the visuals on the board, and I love using my board. So you'll see that a lot in this series when it's necessary. Some concepts might be easy just to talk about them, but today I need the support of this, and hopefully you will need it too, or will be aided by it. So let's start with the law of one. The law of one, we can describe it in a couple of ways. The first one that I like to stress is that it's a sort of philosophy, okay? It's not a science per se, it's not a spiritual belief, it's not even a dogma or anything that can be taught as a sort of curriculum. So it's a philosophy that you can get into, and it has that flexibility of not being something rigid. So I like to start with that because philosophy is just the love for knowledge. That's what philosophy means. Philo means love, and Sophie means knowledge in Greek. So when we have a sort of love for knowledge, then we just develop a sort of philosophy. And now there's a little hint that I have here on the board that I'll get to at the end, and you can probably see it already. If not, we'll get to the end. So it's a philosophy. The law of one is a philosophy, if I can put it simply. However, once you get into the philosophy, you develop what is called a system of thought, or what I would call a system of thought, because once you get all the pieces of a philosophy, then now you can start creating your own ideas and your own perception of reality. And that's the basis of philosophy, to try to talk about reality. And the system of thought sort of develops over time as you get into this knowledge, these views of the world, and these concepts that define everything that is around us. And it takes everything into account. Now, the beauty of the system of thought is that in this case, we're covering all those things that we either have enigmas or mysteries, or simply can't talk about it because we don't have the structure in which we can put all the things together. What am I talking about here? Well, we have science, which is, in a broad sense, science is the way we apply it in our society, is to explain physical phenomena. So the material universe, and that is what science is. Then we have, on the other side, on the flip side of the coin, we have metaphysics, which, if you are at any rate familiarized with metaphysics, it's a broad spectrum of possibilities that you can study and things to learn. And it deals with those things that are not possible to prove like science does. And that's why it's the opposite. So we are dealing with something that can be interpreted in an infinite amount of ways. So it becomes that, as opposed to science being very rigid, metaphysics is very flexible, and sometimes too flexible. And so we want to strike something in the middle. And of course, this philosophy talks about these two things, and it explains them in a beautiful way. The other thing that a system of thought helps us with sort of structuring our way of seeing reality is that it takes into account other things like, say, spirituality, which is something that it's derived from metaphysics and is in a way also attached to the physical reality because we're living it and we're having experiences, and those things that we call the spirit, which it really means just, air, something that is ether or etheric. So we deal with that on a regular basis because that's what our mind is also. It's a sort of channel to the spirits, to those things that we cannot explain, the feelings and so on. And so, there's a lot to study about what I call the system of thought that you develop over time as you get familiarized with the law of one in general. But let me get to the source of the philosophy, which is the material. The material that we have is mainly what is called the raw material. And this material has most, if not all, of the pieces that we need to start building this system of thought. There are other materials that have been channeled, and I'll talk about that in further videos, that are important are complementary, I would say, to the raw material. But this is where we get all the information. Okay, and just to give a brief explanation of what this was, this is the highest level of channel material that we've had in the whole history because of the level of complexity and sophistication that it possesses, the language that is used, the words that are described, the concepts, the specificity of every single answer that was given is just marvelous. And it's really something that astonishes even the most skeptic mind that has at least a thread of interest and curiosity into understanding this. In fact, I would even say that even if you have, because I was, when I started reading this material, I was a complete skeptic in the channeling material because I just didn't believe something that came from another source that wasn't an individual. However, when you start getting into it, you don't have to believe that it was a different source. You can even say that it was the same people. And let's assume that it was, faked and it was all made up and elaborate. Well, just read the message and see what it says. Maybe if you take away just an etheric entity, a higher dimensional entity, or a human, if you get the message itself, you might get into something that you really like and how it's described. You don't have to have an authority that tells you that it needs to be one way for you to believe it. Just digest it yourself. So dive into it and enjoy it. That's what I would say. But that is the source of the Law of One. The material that we have, once again, is the raw material. And two, there are complementary sessions of channeling information that has been done over the course of nearly 40 years or more at this point, actually. So, next point is unity. If this is all sounding like it's confusing and you might buy into it or not, this is the question that really is going to either get you into this or discourage you, like I said. Unity is its basis for the Law of One, for the material, for everything. What do I mean by that? If you want to live in a sort of mentality, the way you live, your philosophy, if your philosophy of life is based on unity, then this is going to make sense to you. Simple as that. I think the vast majority of people would agree at some level, intuitively, that we are one, that unity is the nature of the universe. However, if for some reason you still think that you are a separate being from this reality, at the core of yourself, of your beingness, and you still feel that you're separate from this, which is still possible, then you still might get something out of this if you have curiosity, but you may not get into the material if you think you're separate from everything. If you think that the basis of this reality is separation, which in a way is what scientists in mainstream science, that's what they believe. They believe that everything is separated into bits, into particles, into things. And this material may not be very digested or very digested by people that has this mentality. Now I can tell you anecdotally that I was one of those people, just to give you and be completely clear with you. I was a complete left brain mentality into physics, and everything else was pseudoscience. And it was really this that got me into the idea that spirits actually existed and the way it existed in metaphysics. This was the key or the portal for me to lay down my skepticism in some ways, open my curiosity, and start building what I call a model, which is the next thing we're going to talk about. But once again, if you believe at the core of your beingness, you don't have to feel, but if you believe that unity is the basis of this reality, that we are all one, then trust me, this is going to be a great material for you to study. If on the other hand, you're still plagued by separation, I still encourage you to take a look at it, because you might change the way you think about reality. And I think there's a lot more harmony in thinking that you are one with the universe, as opposed to being separate from the universe, and that you are a victim being pushed around by the events and situations in your life. So, with that being said, I want to finish with the model. The model is what you develop. There is no specific instructions or recipe for you to be like you're going to be converted into the Law of One. The Law of One is simply a way to describe reality in unity that makes sense to you, so you can create your own model based on your own experiences and on your own life and the things that you see and other material that you study. So a model is something that we crave for as humans. We are naturally philosophical because we all have at our core a need to explain the physical reality and the metaphysical reality, which is something that we cannot see and test and touch. We have that need. And so no matter what belief you have, you right now have a model of your reality. But if you're finding that it is plagued by some sort of discomfort, suffering, or simply just negativity in your life, then maybe you can improve that model. And I'm not saying believe in anything specific, but just improve that model so your life is a lot easier and more harmonic. And I think that's the word that I love the most. Harmony is what you want in your life. You don't want to be good or bad. As you will learn, polarity is going to stretch you into some sort of suffering from one side or the other. Whereas harmony, this means that you're calm. You are in a place where you can stay and be, simply be. Now, lastly, I'm going to say that I did mention at the beginning that one of my philosophies is non-duality, which you can associate, of course, with Buddhism. And there's a lot of parallels. If you're interested in Buddhism, that's another thing. You will be completely amazed by all the similarities that the Law of One has with Buddhism. And for those of you who don't know Buddhism, Buddhism is it's not even a philosophy, but it's a study of the mind that the Western world has never achieved and probably will never achieve because, well, for humanity, we have been doing it for over 4,000 years in the East. So this 4 millennia of study of the mind has yielded a beautiful philosophy or system of thought or even a model for thinking about reality. And there are huge parallels here as well with any other major belief system like Christianity or Taoism. There is just a plethora of similarities with everything else because, as the law says, everything is one. And so, with that, I think this is a brief introduction to what the Law of One is. I really can't explain it in a more succinct way because it requires that you get all the different flavors of what the Law of One in general try to explain, and of course its source and everything else. So this may not be the best way for you to get into the Law of One as a concept, but maybe it's enough for you to start delving into what the Law of One is, which is a body of study that you can definitely enjoy, like I do and many others like me are doing right now. So last thing I want to say is this is a series that is going to try to explain, again, briefly, like I said at the beginning, concepts of the Law of One, vocabulary that is there, and things that once we understand it better, it can help us create a better model or improve the model that we have. So if you have any ideas, keep shooting them in the comments, because if you're getting into the Law of One or have been studying for a while, you may have some questions about specific concepts or terminology or the vocabulary in general that is being used there. So leave them in the comments. I'll take a look at them, and if they are suggested by a lot of people, I'll cover it as well. But I have a long list already of all the concepts, and since I talked about the Law of One, the next video that I need to talk about is who is Ra, who gave us the raw material. So that's going to be the next video. If you like this video, do me a favor, hit like, subscribe if you haven't. Most importantly, share it. Share it with other people that may like this type of information. And I think that is all I got to say. Thank you so much for getting here all the way to the end of the first video of this series of concepts, which is the Law of One, which I enjoy a lot. If you know me, you know that I enjoy doing this, and I love it when I have to explain and go on a rant when it's needed. So that's all I have to say. Thank you so much again for watching. I'll see you in the next video, which is going to be who is Ra?